Rhapsody in Black, the life story of John Jasper by Richard Ellsworth Day, a broad-brim book, Philadelphia, the Judson Press. Copyright 1953 by the Judson Press. To Irene Winslow Day, Jerusha, whose constant enthusiasm for this particular one of the broad-brim books and whose labors in behalf of its production have made Rhapsody in Black her very own. What is the best medium, we pondered, for reporting John Jasper? Fluvanna County dialect or regular English? His utterances, however, suffered upon being anglicized. Dialect was unmistakably the accent for his linguist's salads. Farewell, then, dialect. This decision led to surprises. Dialect is a precise and sentient form of speaking which can never be captured by a burnt cork psychology. White men seldom get it at all, often on a single page or column of Jasper reporting. As many as 2 or 3 needlessly variant spellings of a single word appear. So Jerusha built a lexicon. Dialect, it soon appeared, baffled anglicizing. It is much like trying to translate the sermons of Christmas Evans into English. To know Evans fully, one must read him in Welsh. And dialect also is unattainable by mere clowning in the matter of spelling. D-O-N-E, D-U-N, and D-O-N all sound the same to us here at Cedar Palms. The only value of the lame spelling is that the writer fancies he sounds dialectical. Our pages, therefore, shall read done, D-O-N-E, and similarly in all cases where no real difference exists between sound and spelling. Jasper was able, after a few years of preaching, to speak excellent English when he wished, but he was more at home in dialect, and he was a born showman, sensitive to the box office value of exotic flavorings. Are there not near Scotch preachers born in Walla Walla whose audiences are delighted when they refer to the precious Bible? John Jasper, July 4th, 1812, March 28th, 1901. Overture. A rhapsody is generally understood to be the product of stitching together a number of musical fancies into a sort of melodic Joseph's coat. That process yields a much more attractive total than one would think. Consider, for instance, Rhapsody in Blue. This is to be the life story of a very remarkable man, an Afro-American, if you please, whose emotions, thoughts, and utterances about King Jesus were of so high an order, so sustained in ardor, that no better title for him can be found than Rhapsody in Black. My lips shall sing the dying love of the Lamb with my last expiring breath. John Jasper. In order to acquaint you, friend, of the pages with the general run of our composition, a few short melodies in overture form are herewith presented. These melodies will later be worked into variations and otherwise developed. That's good procedure. Anyone who has caught the elfin notes of Evening Star in a certain musical introduction is thereby prepared for its reappearance over and over throughout the whole composition. Therefore, we want you to know at once that this is to be the record of a man, once a slave, whose noisy and rhapsodic demonstration in honor of his Redeemer sounded a distinct note in the history of the Christian church. You need listen only a short time to his disjointed ecstasies to realize you are hearing a Rhapsody in Black. When a certain sleepless night engulfed King Ahasuerus, according to the book of Esther, he countered his misfortune by reading old congressional records, a good thing to do. In this way he came upon the account of one Mordecai who had rendered notable service without so much as a minor citation. This sorry neglect he amended, so far as he could, by having Mordecai paraded through the capital streets on the royal white charger. Thy servant confesses a lusty Ahasuerus complex, but in place of a charger which he hath not, he has decided to devote certain pages in the broad-brimmed books to forgotten heroes of the faith. Therefore he now gives you the Black Apollos of Virginia, a man who achieved greatness in spite of almost limitless adversities. John Jasper's likeness has wall space here in Cedar Palms, along with other great hearts of the faith, such men as Calvin, Augustine, Spurgeon, and Brainerd. A word from the lips of one of yesterday's Virginians, William Eldridge Hatcher, is herewith recorded. I remember how John Jasper poured out his gospel sermons, red hot, full of love, full of invective, full of tenderness, full of bitterness, full of tears, full of everything that ever flamed in a human heart. He was a theater in himself, including the stage, and crowded with actors. He was a battlefield, and the generals and the soldiers and the artillery. His face had upon it the beauty of Jesus, and his skin pigment became invisible. He was good company for even the angels. When this brilliant white Baptist orator lay dying, August 12, 1912, in Careby Hall, his Flavanna County home, sorrowing friends about his bed heard him whisper, John Jasper, we're brothers now, and we'll live forever around the throne of God. Richard E. Day, Cedar Palms, Alhambra, California, June 1st, 1953. The capital of the Cavaliers, 1706, 1952. The lofty guest room in Hotel Richmond provided a round-the-clock view of the fabulous city. Below lay Capitol Square, and clustered about buildings of great historic interest. The thought could not be dismissed. What an impressive place. It has had the best of materials in its making. Here one may dream of the cavalcade of significant men which passed along the streets, presidents and poets, cavaliers and colonials, patriots and promoters. But the necessities of these annuals require that no more be written of such matters than will aid in making a background for the life of our hero. The Lord stuck me fuss on my buff day down in Capitol Square. John Jasper. The reason for registering in Hotel Richmond was that the 9th Street front towered above Capitol Square, upon the green lawns of which more than 100 years ago John Jasper came under conviction. On the north side of this 12-acre park stands the marbled excellence of Virginia's Capitol building, the central portion of which was designed by Thomas Jefferson. During the time Jefferson was minister to France, he was captivated by the Mason Carré of Nantes and modeled his Greco-composite Capitol building from it. The central portion, finished in 1796, looked down on Jasper that heated July 4. It could be that a few readers are surprised by the versatility of our third president, that he was capable of drafting good architecture as well as good constitutions. So a note is herewith appended about one of Jefferson's dwelling house plans. This note serves not only to tell about Jefferson, but also to make clear that the people of his day were familiar with life's good things. About 50 miles west of Capitol Square, on an excellent bluff fronting the James River, is Jefferson's Bremo. William Lawrence Bottomley said of it, "Bremo is the most magnificent conception of a private residence I have seen in America." About 30 miles down the James River, southeastward from our lofty room in Williamsburg, the governor's palace was erected there in the early 1700s. Its dainty massiveness is not apt to be excelled at any age. Enough of that. A little chapter space must be given to those ideals, such as separation of church and state, which sprang up in this land like roots out of a dry ground. When 3 annoying Baptists were jailed near Williamsburg, Patrick Henry shouted angrily in their defense, "But may it please your worships, permit me to inquire once more, for what are these men about to be tried?" This paper says, "For preaching the gospel of the Son of God." Great God, for preaching the Savior to Adam's fallen race? That same spiritual fire, as we shall presently see, was part of Jasper's background. Just below our window on the edge of the square stands the old bell tower, built in 1824 to ring out a call to the colors for regular and volunteer troops. The tower was standing almost new, just behind Jasper's bench that day in July 1839. Lean out the high hotel window. On the Gray Street corner stands the Westminster of Richmond, St. Paul's Episcopal Church. This gracious edifice was not completed until 1845, but in the years of Jasper's servitude he often passed it, and into its auditorium one April day, 1865, a man rushed to whisper tidings into President Jefferson Davis's ear, tidings which meant that Jasper's fetters were broken. Look southwest toward Mayo's Bridge on the James River. Very near the location of this bridge is the place where in 1607 Christopher II, Captain Christopher Newport, and party grounded their birch barks for a conference with Chief Potawatomi. Captain Newport had anchored his 3 sailing vessels, the Sarah Constant 100 tons, the Goodspeed 40 tons, and the Little Discovery 20 tons, to paddle up the James River. With him were about 100 men. Among them, charged with being a mutinous crewman, was a notable prisoner, Captain John Smith. Newport had been urged by his king to bring gold back to England. In 1608, therefore, he returned to this country and shipped back a boatload of Ophir beauty. This ore turned out to be, well, we will read from the letter of Sir Walter Beaupie. "We made 4 trials by the best experienced about London. In the end, all turned to vapor, i.e., all proved to be fool's gold." It is appropriate to record but little more of the brocaded excellence of Richmond. At the time of Jasper's experience in Capitol Square, Edgar Allan Poe's ancient home stood at 19th and Main. On 13th, near Broad Street, was St. John's Church, still reverberating with Patrick Henry's "Give me liberty or give me death." Side by side with the historic excellence of our city were the worst of things. What big city, however, is without this contrast? A short distance north and west of Capitol Square is one of America's shabbiest Bagdads. On Duval Street there is a decrepit old building, the 6th Mount Zion Baptist Church, which, like an angel in bricks, ministers to a race of hovel-dwelling men. This town of Richmond hath a pleasant seat, 90 miles from the Atlantic, yet a port for ocean-going vessels, a city which, to borrow the patter of their own Chamber of Commerce, is mellow yet modern. The rustle of the past is still heard amid the bustle of the present. Its nearly 300,000 population in 1950 cherishes the old dreams, but is always weaving new ones. One hardly knows which of the epitaphs to adopt in speaking of Richmond. You would say the Boston of Virginia if you had eyes for its schools and colleges, or the New Rome upon counting the 7 hills budding beneath its buildings, or the capital of the Cavaliers, if you recall those early strutters alighting from their windjammers wearing tin Stetsons. But for our part, we will settle for the city of John Jasper. The Yabawak Age, 1607, CIRCA 1900. It is a vegetable of singular strength and power, Queen Elizabeth. Its stinking fume is loathsome to the eye, hateful to the nose, dangerous to the lungs, and harmful to the brains, King James. But tobacco sure does finance colleges, Bayside Cynic. Hang up your long green, pile up your rocks, and you'll always have tobacco in your old tobacco box, folk song. Shortly after Captain Christopher Newport and his party landed from his shallops, Chief Powhatan showed them his crude fields of yucca. Repeat that word as did the Indians with the accent on the last syllable, and it sounds a little like tobacco. It was tobacco. It's spelled YPPOWAC. And tobacco swiftly became the percussion undertone of a New World symphony. Its recurrence may be heard from the time of Queen Elizabeth, who, when she surprised Sir Walter Raleigh smoking a long stem pipe, exclaimed, "Smoking to go," to the latest patter of the radio network, Smoke a Ducky. Smoking to go, precisely what the Queen meant by this, there is no knowing. But to the colonist, the words had the jingle of a good commercial. By the year 1700, over 1 million people had moved into the tidewater lands of the New World, and tens of thousands who settled in Virginia were toying with the tobacco business. The wilderness up to the gentle foothills of the Appalachians began rapidly to dissolve into plantations. These settlers, like the good Queen Bess, they carved her "Smoking to Gold" slogan on a rock high above the waters of the James River, and they named the Old Dominion just what she suggested, Virginia. Their tongues, which they wore in their cheeks, were there as shepherds to the quads, and not because of the Virgin Queen's 12 avid sweethearts. It was a goodly land which these colonials broke up into plantations. For proof, read the ads today about Virginia resorts, where gentlemen in red coats ride after Mr. Reynard and his family. These plantations, separated for the most part by unbridged rivers and bays, developed a peculiar type of civilization. There were few villages and no banks. They were nearer to London than they were to each other. Consequently, the plantations became deluxe reproductions of Europe at its best. Storied menages with their great houses, life patterns, and climate-fashioned garments. In these communities, the FFVs, First Families of Virginia, developed. Fine old Southern families whose aristocracy was never antagonistic to democracy, and whose like we may never see again. One feature you could always find: a certain plantation practice, dignified and friendly. A gentleman would offer you a chew of tobacco out of a brown canvas pouch edged with a yellow tape, using as a rule his mother-of-pearl handle knife. Oh, to be sure, Virginia raised much more than tobacco. It is a land also where the cotton and the corn and taters grow. The poetry of those commodities loaned itself to music. It is hard to raise the muse concerning long green, but long green will raise mortgages. It can be smoked, chewed, and snuffed, or made into an effective spray against aphids. As William Bell Riley said upon every remembrance of the little tobacco field which financed his seminary course, after all, that's how we got our money in those days. Wooden Indians hewn from primitive logs with stoic stare and unruffled feather headgear marched in droves to sidewalk positions in front of the shops of a new industry. Tobacco stores in such cities as Richmond became social meeting places for gentlemen. In the year 1888, the tobacco merchants of Richmond threw off all lingering modesty and called the attention of the world at large to this product of Virginia soil. It fills your home with the solid comforts which invigorate and the refinements which lend charm to domesticacy. This grateful tribute to Dame Nicotine was accompanied by a general invitation directed to all continental Europe, the Sultan of Araby, the blessed to the sassy Dudeen, and the Chinese Mandarin. You are invited to attend a premium sale of tobacco in the old exposition grounds October the 25th, 1888. The leaf industry is the means for directly supporting a quarter of our 60,000 population. 5 years later, 1893, the Richmond Chamber of Commerce issued a publication, The City on the James, stating, "The tobacco trade, all things considered, is the mainstay and sheer anchor of the city's commerce." The qualification, all things considered, was well advised. There were indeed other products in Virginia, and very notable ones at that. But under the clouds rising from the Old Dominion's industries, you would be most impressed by the tobacco business. This much of a color stroke will help the reader to understand a certain long tobacco shed, a seminary blazing hot on a July day when row upon row of slaves, sweating until their faces glistened, ripped stems from carefully selected tobacco leaves. You will be most interested in a certain one of these slaves, young, strikingly athletic, named John Jasper. "My son, Onesimus. White race, you'll have to answer for what you've done to Jasper, old Negro plant. Unto Philemon, our dearly beloved and fellow laborer, I beseech thee for my son, Onesimus, whom I have begotten in my bonds. Receive him forever, not now as a servant, but above a servant, a brother beloved." Philemon 1:10, 15, 16. Everywhere my brothers in Sepia have courteously let me know they dislike the word Negro. To them it is a shame name. Other citizens, they say, are called after a land. Irish American, German American. We too came from a land still beloved of us, Africa. We like the term Afro-American. Very well. The pages of our Rhapsody, save in quotation, shall always speak of you as Afro-Americans. Sketchbook. The iniquity of slavery can never be obliterated without the mind of Christ. Unaided human thinking as its highest, as seen in Aristotle, defends bondage on the ground of race diversity. Mankind is divisible into the free and the slaves by nature. But the man of Galilee took the slave by one hand and the owner by the other, set them face to face, and said, "You are brothers." The reason why we have the so-called Negro problem today is that emancipation as a political advance has not been accompanied by the higher dynamic of not now as a slave, but above a slave, a brother beloved. Sketchbook. The shadow of our hero falling upon this book in these opening pages reveal that he was in fetters, and that lives a problem too critical to be ignored. It seemed difficult enough to write about the Old Dominion and its capital city without letting admiration dictate the sentences. But it is far more difficult to write about slavery without saying too much, or worse, too little. If slavery were merely an ancient problem now removed from the world, the task would be more simple. But alas, it is still, in 1953, a living issue. In dark portions of the globe, there is yet actual slavery. And in the United States, there is yet the Negro problem, which is the result of nothing else than that the minds and hearts of men lag behind their political professions. If anyone has as yet dramatized the story of Onesimus, as did one author, the story of the seamless dress, we have not found it. There are puzzling nuances in the old record, the resolution of which would provide any writer with a distaff full of wool. Why didn't Paul utter forthright condemnation of Philemon's slaveholding? Did Philemon immediately free Onesimus into a wolf world? How was the Onesimus problem resolved in the domestic currents of a Greek home? How could Philemon, one-time slave owner, talk to Onesimus, a slave, about Christian faith? The very first thing our aspiring author would feel called upon to examine as Exhibit A would be the modern world reappearance of the Onesimus question in the Jasper story. Here he would see that the ex-slave himself had a most important part. This is discerned in an old Southern newspaper which extolled the good judgment of Jasper. Jasper's allusions to his old master were in keeping with all that he had to say about white people after the emancipation. He loved white people, and among them his friends and lovers were counted by the thousand. On the owner's side, the words of the splendid Virginian William Elred Hatcher on the subject of Christianizing the Negro would certainly be worth quoting by the author of our Onesimus story. It is not my purpose herein either to defend or to condemn slavery, but in picturing the condition of things which encompassed Jasper during the days of slavery, it is worthwhile to let it be understood that it was during their bondage and under the Christian influence of Southern people that the Negroes of the South were made a Christian people. It was the best piece of missionary work ever yet done upon the face of the earth. And now, with eyes to the Christian solution of slavery and its aftermath, tribulation, the Negro problem, we are spared much speaking about history, the stinking and screaming hellboats of Arab and Portuguese as they conducted a legitimate business between Africa and America, the costly of Americans who did business with these ocean gangsters under the excuse slavery was sequel to the discovery of America, or even the Bible justifies slavery. Nor need much be said about a Roman Catholic priest, Bartolome de las Casas, who, to emancipate the Indians, transferred their chains to African slaves, and thus became the father of slavery as well as the protector of the Indians. Having found the little but priceless Onesimus story, we need no more than glance at the tearful records of yesterday, watching the traffic, big with peril, grow more dreadful every day, grow until in the year 1860 there were in the United States 3,953,760 slaves of an average value of $600 each, grow until a residual problem almost as great as the original still remains unsolved. Someone has said, architecture is the raised letters for reading civilizations. If that be true, the slave shacks spell out a dreadful judgment. They may be seen even to this day. Drive southward from Shreveport, Louisiana to the Gulf of Mexico. There they stand in 1953, still inhabited, screenless against flies, no windows, just barn doors, bedding hung out in the daytime to purge the vermin, smoking fires on hot house nights to fight the skeeter bugs. We might look in fear for the future if we did not remember the whole sinister threat was once resolved and may be resolved again. Not now as a slave, but above a slave, a brother beloved. Ivy Ford, Anne had a river. Old time there am not forgotten. Look away, look away, look away, Dixieland. To look through the stone column entrance of Fort Union Military Academy is to gain a preliminary idea of the graces that marked old Fluvanna County sketchbook. The old Dominion's 42,450 square miles were broken up into 100 counties each of which upon equal division should have had about 425 square miles. But Fluvanna County, 40 miles west of Richmond, received considerably less than her share. What she failed to get in area, however, was bountifully supplied otherwise. Fluvanna County's southern border stretches for about 20 miles along the James River, from which line she unfurls her sylvan acres northward about 15 miles, like a banner from the hand of God. It was and is a great land for starring with plantation houses and stripping with tobacco rows. Originally, most of Fluvanna's lovely acres were deeded by an English king to one of his favorites, and this favorite